Hello, fight fans, and welcome to a very special TWSN MMA show. With the holidays upon us and the last UFC card of the year in the rear view, it is time we present to you the TWSN End of the Year MMA Award Show. As always, I am your host, Ted Ashbrock. I am joined with my co-hosts, Evan Theo Harris, Nader Asaf. We are the TWSN MMA team. Follow us, subscribe to the YouTube channel, get ready for a big 2023 year. If you're with me and Cincy, we go legal sports betting on the first of the year. You already know we're going to go crazy. We were profitable when it wasn't legal. We're going to be more profitable when it is legal. But let's jump into these awards. First off, the most important one to the casuals, certainly, knockout of the year. I will present to you our four nominees. We have Leon Rocky Edwards knocks out Kamaru Usman with a head kick in the 5th round of UFC 278. Michael Chandler knocks out Tony Ferguson with a front kick from hell at UFC 274. Zhang Wei Li knocks out Joanna, former champion Joan Jacek, with a spinning back fist at UFC 275. And Alex Pereira puts Sean Strickland's lights out, almost his life out, with a left hook from the Poetan Stone Fist himself at UFC 281. I will go first. You saw the shirt. If you've watched us, you know my shirts foreshadow my answers. Pound for pound, headshot dead, the most perfect shot landed in 2022. There's the story, there's the comeback, there's the corner, the amazing corner work from Leon. There's the videos before of him setting up that shot. And then there's the 1-2 follow, same side head kick that put Kamaru Usman out for the first time in his UFC career and the first time in 19 fights. He was coming with a 19-fight win streak. He was up 3-1 on every scorecard. He had outstruck Leon Edwards 83-55. And from the depths of defeat, as John Anik just told everyone, Leon is not cut from the cloth of quit. He did not quit, and he landed the shot that I'm deeming knockout of the year. Evan, I'll hand it to you.
I think this is between one of two knockouts, either the Leon Edwards head kick or the Michael Chandler head kick on Tony Ferguson. When I saw that, that took me right back to Anderson Silva knocking out Vitor Belfort. I mean, it gave me that same feeling, but that one was even nastier. I think the Anderson Silva one was more like, it set that like, all right, the front kick can be used effectively, but my goodness, that kick from Michael Chandler, watching Ferguson's body just kind of, it's like it just shut him down. Like it wasn't a TKO. He didn't need follow-ups. I mean, he shut his body off. And that was, he starched him. But Nader, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, Ted, Evan, both your predictions are, they're 100% valid. If anything, they were 1 and 2 on my list, but I'm going to have to go with the same pick as Evan here, Michael Chandler and Tony Ferguson. Not only was UFC 274, that was a great main card in general. I know that's one of our nominees for one of our later awards, but, this fight in general, it was just crazy to see Michael Chandler go from someone who got knocked down by Tony Ferguson. Everybody was like, oh, is the old Tony back? Is this the guy that we knew and we loved? And then out of nowhere, it was out of nowhere. It's not like he was stringing Tony together with some beautiful combinations. It's not like he'd been winning the fight up to this point, frankly. And then he just hit him with the nastiest front kick of all time. Arguably one of the nastiest knockouts we've ever seen. And like Evan said, his body just went down. It went limp. And then when they showed the slow-mo replay to see Tony Ferguson's face like that, it was heartbreaking because I'm a big Tony Time fan. But my jaw was dropped for 10 minutes. I couldn't speak a word. And when something like that has an effect on you, I think it's got to be in the running for some award. So I have it for knockout of the year.
Listen, I'm standing firm on Leon Rocky, but to your defense, there's an Anderson Silva front kick to the face, and then there's punting somebody's head off of their neck. And that is what Michael Chandler did. He punted that man's head like a football. But after knockout of the year, there's only one thing we can get into, and that's submission of the year. Our 4 nominees are Saeed Nurmagomedov. Come on, boys.
Saeed Nurmagomedov.
You know the last name. Saeed. Old Saeed submits Cody Stamann with a guillotine from medieval times. Looked like he was going to pop his head off. Also, that's one of the performances of the year, too. This kid didn't quite make our breakthrough fight of the year, but Saeed Nurmagomedov is a problem in a division that's a shark tank. And his guillotine, you saw it with Saeed Yakub last week. That kid's guillotine is ferocious. Like, it's one of the best. If I've always said Alex Pereira's left hand is the best punch in MMA, this kid's guillotine might be the most dangerous submission in MMA, because the way he was huffing and puffing, he was out of that Saeed fight, and he still pulled it off. So that's up there for me. That was at UFC 270 a little earlier on in the year. Paul Craig submits Nikita Krylov. Again, a triangle from the pits of defeat, as Paul Craig always does it. That was at UFC London in March. We'll talk about that whole card later. Jessica Andrade submits Amanda Lemos with a submission I've only seen this only one time, a standing arm triangle. Now, I don't necessarily watch ADCC or her submission tournaments, but I've never seen a standing arm triangle, especially not from the shorter fighter. I'll get into that. And then last but certainly not least, Yuri Prochazka submits Glover Teixeira, the submission specialist, in the 5th round of a championship fight at UFC 275. Certainly not the flashiest, the least flashy of the 4 nominees, but the biggest submission at the biggest time is Yuri Prochazka there. Again, I will go first, and I think I alluded to it. I'm going with Jessica Andrade. A 5'3"
demon
strawweight female getting a standing triangle on the taller fight. It looked like a glitch on a UFC video game where you got some type of weird finish that you would never get in real life. She's submitting her like this. Like, you shouldn't even be able to get the torque on that arm triangle. I've never seen it. We will probably never see it again, especially not from the smaller fighter. It didn't have the big. It was a UFC fight night. It wasn't a pay-per-view. It wasn't a UFC London where Paul Craig got the hometown crowd cheering. But it was clearly on this list, in my opinion, the most impressive, spectacular, rare submission. So that's what I'm going with. Nader will go number 2 for you on this one. What do you think?
As much as I love that one and I want to pick it, it's just something about Saeed's submission that's calling to me. It's not even the submission itself, but that entire fight. I believe it was about 47 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah, 50 seconds of fight time. And he went in there and he went guns a-blazing. You know, those body kicks, those spinning back kicks. Oh, my God, I love them. The way that he just set up everything to lead into that submission was beautiful. You know, it's one of my favorite rounds that I've watched all year, although it was more one-sided, of course, because Saeed killed Cody Stamann. But the way he set it up, and like you said, those guillotines are just disgusting. How tight he has them, the way he sets them up. And on a UFC 270 card that lost a lot of fights, you know, the week leading into it, and everybody was worried about how weak it was going to be, that was one of the fights that was like, you know, that I remember being one of the more enjoyable ones that really helped the card become from a below average card to anything above average. I really like that card. And Saeed's submission was one of the reasons. So I have him for submission of the year.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely one of the best submissions of the year, but I'm going to go with Paul Craig's triangle over Nikita Krylov. I mean, when I went back and watched that one today, and it was so smooth, like
quick. It happened so quick.
It almost reminded me of like when you go on YouTube and you watch like how to do this submission, and like it's like Nikita Krylov was just like the guy who agreed to be triangle choked in this video, but he was beating up Paul Craig. I mean, he was just pounding him, and it's like Paul Craig kept his composure and he just slipped it right in. And as soon as it was in 10 seconds, it was over. He knew he was not getting out of that. I mean, the fact that he tapped out Magomed Ankalaev with 1 second left just shows how tight those submissions are. And I mean, he knew that he was done. I got to go with Paul Craig. in this one.
What's crazy to me too about that submission is that we saw Paul Craig go out during that fight. He quite literally like went to sleep for a second, and then out of nowhere, like, you know, everybody talks about Paul Craig being the guy that can just throw up a submission last minute when he's getting 10-7 and he'll win. And that was quite literally the example of what, you know, you always talk about. So, I mean, just looking back on 2022, just in general, I know that, you know, we still have many more awards to go and many more things to talk about, but just looking, it was a crazy year of mixed martial arts, especially for the UFC.
Yeah, and listen, I didn't pick it, but that Paul Craig, I had publicly on TWSN put out a free parlay plus 900, and I had Paul Craig as one of the third legs of that. So to say I was sweating that fight is an understatement. And we'll move on to our third, and this is one of my favorite ones. Nader just talked about this year in MMA as a whole, so I'll take a step back. I think 2022 negatively was the year of the lost fight, the injuries, and the dropouts. But on the pro side, 2022 was the year of the comeback, just in martial arts, just in combat sports, period. So we go to maybe the biggest one we discussed for this year, because these are any one of these is a good pick. Comeback of the year. Let's get right into it. Drew Dober defeats Terrence McKinney via first round TKO. If I tell you it's a comeback and I tell you the guy finished him in the first round, that's a fight you need to go watch if you haven't seen it.
Insane.
Drew Dober was out on his feet 3 times in one round and just won a war of attrition. He just stayed in there longer. He had more dog in his heart. He has the chiseled chin of the gods. I mean, and that's not even my pick. Number 2, Matt Schnell defeats Sumadarji via second round submission. Come on. I mean, guys, this one's fun. Number 3, Leon Edwards again defeats Kamaru Usman via 5th round knockout in the biggest fight of his life that he was down 3-1. And last but not least, in another championship effort, a guy that came into this year an unranked fighter with 1 fight in the UFC, finished the year knocking out the best middleweight of all time. Alex Pereira knocks out Israel Adesanya in the 5th round, again with a left hook from Satan. Pick any one of these. I'm going Matt Schnell because that fight was stupid. That's the one fight where in my heart easily should have probably been stopped before it was for the losing fighter. Sumadarji probably had a round 1 and a round 2 TKO from half the referees in MMA. The referee that stopped the Izzy Alex Pereira fight would have stopped the Sumadarji Matt Schnell fight. Matt Schnell was bleeding. He was leaking. He wasn't defending himself. And all of a sudden, he just finds a triangle on bottom. I'm not going to give you the whole story of the fight because you saw it, you know it, it's been talked about. But I think that's a comeback of all time. I think it's a top 10 comeback of all time. He's the one fighter on here. Izzy was winning the fight, yes, but he didn't have Alex Pereira out of the fight. Kamaru was winning the fight, yes, but he did not have Leon out of the fight. Terrence McKinney almost had Drew Dober out of the fight. That's probably my number 2. But when I tell you Sumadarji had all but finished this fight with 6 step-in elbows, knockdowns, blood, cuts, everything. The fight was over until it wasn't. It's the definition of that meme, call the cops. But for him, that's literally what Schnell did to him. And I know you guys are going to go with, I'm not going to tell your picks, but you're going to go with some guy that's floating on the screen right now. And I'm okay with that. But Matt Schnell deserves his flowers, and I hope I just gave it to him. Evan, we'll go to you for number 2.
As you alluded to, I'm going with Leon Edwards here over Kamaru Usman. But just one thing I want to mention about that Matt Schnell-Sumadarji fight. I watched that fight live, and that fight one of the craziest fights I've ever seen. And I agree, it was the comeback I've ever seen. And the picture after the fight of Sumadarji just sprawled out on the canvas like a bloody mess, and Matt Schnell with his hands up like he just won the belt. I was like, this has got to be the sickest thing I've ever seen. I mean, I was taken aback, but I'm going to go with Leon Edwards over Kamaru Usman because I was one of the most staunch people on Kamaru Usman winning this fight. I didn't think there was a chance in hell that Leon Edwards won this fight. Round one, Leon Edwards wins that round clearly. I mean, he took Kamaru Usman down. No one's ever done that. And at that point, I was like, something feels like it's going to happen in this fight. And I was just waiting for it to happen. Round two, Usman came back, got his number. Round three, he was building. Round four, it looked like it was pretty much all but over going in the fifth round. Like he had figured it out. And I was like, damn, it's not what I thought was going to happen. Like I was like, Leon isn't going to win this fight. And 50 seconds left. I mean, I want to say that John Anik may have had the greatest call in commentating history in MMA. He said he's not cut from that cloth. And as soon as he says it, that head kick, which is, I mean, he folded him. I was screaming at 1 a.m. I feel bad for my neighbors because my house was shaking after that knockout. It was one of the craziest things I've ever called it in the first round. I pretty much lost all hope, but I got to give Leon Edwards his credit here because I didn't give him knockout of the year, but I am going to give him comeback of the year. Nader, what do you got here?
100% agree. You know, Matt Schnell, props to you. Ted, you definitely gave him his flowers there, no doubt. And like, I have to go watch that fight because unfortunately, I missed it live. But I saw the highlights. I saw, the clip of Matt Schnell, just how it affected the MMA world, and people were treating it like a great fight, and rightly so. I saw the blood. I saw him sprawled out, like Evan said. It was a really cool sight to see. But now that I know the context even more behind it, that's awesome. But like Ted Shirt says, pound for pound, headshot, bang. He was losing 3 rounds to 1. Not only that, there was a minute left in the fight. There was literally 60 seconds before Kamaru Usman retained Leon Edwards. Afterthought in the division now. He has to go win 2 or 3 more fights before he even gets, reconsidered for a title shot. And now this guy is about to go to London, get himself a pay-per-view built around him in one of the most just stunning fashions of all time. Because not only was this head kick just beautiful, it wasn't lucky. He knew what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing with his combination. He's practiced it before. His corner motivated him. And just the sight of seeing Kamaru Usman laid out like that is something I frankly never thought I would ever see unless he faced Hamzat. And, we saw Hamzat. We even saw Hamzat get shocked this year by Gilbert Burns, although he ended up winning. So just a year, again, full of surprises, full of comebacks, like Ted said. And I think that one has to take the cake.
Beautiful accidental, I believe, foreshadow there from Nader. Gilbert Burns versus Hamzat Chimaev. We're going to get right into it. Fight of the year. And that's our first nominee. Gilbert Burns versus Hamzat Chimaev, the co-main event, I believe. Or did that main event? That was the co-main. No, because there's 3 rounds. Yes, 3 rounds. If Gilbert had 5, we're not going to get into that. That's not this video. But Gilbert Burns versus Hamzat Chimaev, UFC 273 co-main event. Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira, the championship main event of UFC 275. Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler, another 3-rounder in the co-main event of UFC 281. And a 1-round fire fest. Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje at UFC 274. This one's hard for me. Because you pick one, you're discounting the other 3. And these fights are fight of all-time caliber. True, I mean, as far as 1-round championship fights go, Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje is electricity summed within under 5 minutes, truly. But I am going to go with what I think. I mean, listen, TWSN, I hope you guys love us. I hope you guys watch us, but we're not the number 1 MMA website out there yet. A lot of people have given out their awards. I think we're mostly all in agreement in this one. Yuri versus Glover is the fight of the year. It's one of the best fights of all time. If we didn't have those insane comebacks, it could be slotted in comeback of the year because you have Yuri Prochazka winning a fight he was down on the scorecards in with 28 seconds left in the fight. He submitted the submission specialist, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Brazilian specialist, with 28 seconds left in the fight. He had no business losing. He was a big favorite. He was clearly the better fighter, but he played with his food just long enough to make the fight that much more exciting. And you go into a round 5, he's down 39-37, 38-37, and an even 38-38 scorecard. He's getting outstruck 21-6 in strikes in that 5th round. You guys do the math. He was 28 seconds away from losing that fight and new. Now, injuries, whatever. He's not the champion right now. That's unfortunate. The light heavyweight division is in shambles. But on that night, the light heavyweight division might have been the most interesting division in the UFC. We had seen Jan Blachowicz capture the title and beat Israel Adesanya just to lose it to a 40-plus-year-old Glover Teixeira. John Jones is out of the picture. He doesn't matter anymore in this division. And then the rising god himself, the true last samurai. We have the last stylebender. Whatever, he lost. But the last samurai of the UFC, Yuri Prochazka, comes in and puts on the fight of the year, in my opinion. Now, because I've already said enough about this one, I'm going to go to our counter opinion here. I'm going to ask Nader what you have to say about this one.
As awesome of a fight as that was, Ted, it's just something about Hamza versus Gilbert. It's just something about that fight. You know, of course, Jerry, it's still, I understand that Glover was really tired, but when you're 28 seconds away, you got to have some more willpower than to just pull guard. Like, why did you pull guard? You were winning the fight. You had him out on his feet, essentially. I'm not saying that he would have knocked him out, but if he just, even if he just jabbed for the next 28 seconds, just safely played it. We see Jiri as the champion right now. He just had a title defense instead of fighting for the vacated title against Jamal Hill, which out of all the expectations after what happened the last card at 282, that's not one of the things I think I would be expecting to see. I'm happy it's happening, though, because Glover gets a shot. Jamal Hill, one of my favorite fighters in the division, he gets a shot. But Khamzat and Burns is just nobody thought Gilbert Burns was going to be that guy and just step up. Nobody thought. And I think genuinely, I was one of those people. I forgot how seriously good Gilbert Burns was. And what's crazy to me afterwards is not only did they put on an entertaining fight, but, you know, nobody knew who was going to win. Gilbert could have won. Hamza could have won. And I would have been happy in both scenarios because, in all honesty, they both deserved to win. I'm happy they both got a bonus that night, I believe, because they deserved it. It was a 3-round war. Who knows? Like you said, who knows what would have happened if it went a full 5. But just in retrospect, Hamza, he didn't go into that fight listening to his coaches. He wanted to showboat, and Gilbert caught him. And in the end, the fans were entertained. Hamzat still got the win. Gilbert, he just got even more credit for being awesome and just being a great fighter. And, you know, he proved that he's one of the BMFs of just the UFC in general. So it was a fantastic fight, you know, alongside Jiri and Glover. I think that's my number 1. Jiri and Glover's my number 2.
Yeah, I'm with Ted on this. I'm going to go with Yuri and Glover. I watched that fight live. I mean, it was another one of those fights that you just had that feeling about that it was just such a great fight. I was rooting for Glover the whole time. I love myself some Glover Teixeira, but I didn't think he had much of a shot. But man, when he started winning that fight, I was like, oh my God, he's actually going to beat. Like, going into that 5th round, I was like, oh my God, because I had sprinkled a little bit on Glover to win that fight because I was like, you know, I love the guy. We'll see what happens here. And he was winning, and I was like, oh my God, Glover Teixeira is going to win this fight, and he's going to prove, like, you know, he's not just some fluky champion. And then, you know, the fight goes to the ground, and I'm like, all right, just watch your neck, watch it, because that's what he's going to go for. And then, like, 5 seconds after this choke gets in, I just see this tap, and I was almost in tears. I was so excited because I thought, oh my, Glover's going to win this fight. And then he he just didn't. And it was so shaken by that. But man, that was just, there was so much, there was the elements of, there was every element you could have wanted in an MMA fight in that fight. You know, there was a great striking. It ended on the ground. I mean, it was just such a great fight. And I mean, to have a great year of MMA and have that as your fight of the year, I've got to show love to both of those guys here.
Absolutely, man. And you love to see a division that coming into this year, I think a lot of people were kind of counting out. You love to see them having, even if you don't pick it number one, just contention for fight of the year. Like they single-handedly brought the light heavyweight division back into people's hearts. And I love it. And I'm with you. I'm going with them. But the only thing better than an individual great fight is a full card of great fights. And so we will move right into event of the year. I think we've probably already mentioned at least one fight on every one of these cards so far. So we'll get right into the nominees. UFC 281. And you know what? For the sake of it, in case you don't know, I'll highlight something from every card. UFC 281 early prelims, we had 3 knockouts. Carlos Ulberg knocks out Nikolay, not going to say that last name for the sake of our viewers. And then Michael Trezano knocks out Choi Sung-woo. I took a shot at that last name, but the thing that mattered in that fight, double knockdown.
Double knockdown.
Only double knockdown of the year. Gotta shout that one out. Matt Frivola starches Ottoman What's in the Bag as Aitar. That's all, for the record, those 3 fights are all in the early prelims. Prelims, we have Hanato Moicano subs Brad Riddell easily. Ryan Spann probably retires Dominic Reyes. Aaron Blanchfield demolishes Molly McCann right in front of the Barstool Boys. We have, in the main event, Dan Hooker redemption against Claudio Puelles. Chris Gutierrez retires Frankie Edgar with a standing knee. Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler just had it as a nominee for Fight of the Year. Zhang Wei Li gets her belt back against Carla Esparza. And of course, Alex Pereira dethrones one of the greatest middleweights of all time, Israel Adesanya. So I'll just get it out of the way. That's my pick right there. Our other 3 cards are going to be UFC 275, headlined by the fight we just deemed Fight of the Year, at least in me and Evan's corner. Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira. A couple other highlights. Valentina Shevchenko squeezed by Tyler Santos. Squeezed by to defend her belt. Zhang Wei Li again. So she's in 2 of the best cards of the year. Starches Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Jake Matthews shocks the world and knocks out Andre Fialho. Jack Della Maddalena, maybe Rookie of the Year. We're not doing that award, but I'll give it to him. He's probably Rookie of the Year. Starches Ramazan Emiev with some of the best body work we saw all year. And then we've got UFC Paris, Cyril Gane, Tai Tuivasa, Robert Whittaker, Marvin Vettori, Nasruddin Imavov, Joaquin Buckley, Roman Kopylov, Alessio Di Chirico. Nader's favorite, Abus Magomedov, has one of the best debuts of the year, starches Dustin Stoltzfus. And last but not least, a card, again, Evan has talked about, UFC London, earlier in the year in March, Tom Aspinall, straight arm lock on the giant Russian that is Alexander Volkov. Arnold Allen gets Dan Hooker out of there quick. Patty Pimblett finishes Kazul Vargas in the first round. Molly McCann with easily number 5 contender for knockout of the year, spinning elbow on Luana Carolina. Ilia Topuria survives a head kick to go on and erase Jai Herbert. Paul Craig talked about that submission on Nikita Krylov. This is a tough one, boys. We had some big cards this year. Maybe I'm going recency bias, but I went UFC 281. Between the comeback of Alex Pereira, the fight of the night of Dustin and Mike Chandler, the standing knee from Chris Gutierrez, passing the throne of a former champion in Frankie Edgar to a brand new contender in Chris Gutierrez, and the redemption of Dan Hooker. You have to love to see the redemption of Dan Hooker. You have to love to see an absolute leg grabbing crotch sniffer like Claudio Puelles just get put out bad. I mean, nobody went out more sad than he did in that fight. And so I'm going UFC 281. You guys are, I think, in agreement here, and it's my close number 2. So I'll let either one of you, whoever takes dibs, take it away.
I'd like to take this one here to start. Yeah, I think this for me was definitely between my choice and UFC 281. UFC 281 was, in my opinion, definitely the best pay-per-view of the year. And honestly, it could go either way. I think the reason I'm giving it to UFC London here is because of just how electric that atmosphere was. I mean, I unfortunately could not watch this card live, but I watched it back knowing everything that happened, and I still felt like I was watching it live just by how exciting it was to watch. And there was I'm going to go over these real quick. Muhammad Mokaev, I mean, that dude is a star, and he started off the night, beautiful submission over Cody Durden. We had Jack Shore, hometown guy, beats Timur Valiev. The Paul Craig submission that I talked about earlier. Woo, wow, that was slick. Sergey Pavlovich, who is going to be a nominee later on in here, just demolishes Shamil Abdurakhimov. Makwana Murakami looked like he was on his way out of the UFC, submits Mike Grundy. Ilya Topuria, and another one that could have been a knockout of the year contender here. I mean, he made Jai Herbert look like he was dead. I was a little scared for Jai Herbert's life after he hit the canvas. Molly McCann, back-to-back, knocks out Luana Carolina. I mean, the meatball was feeling it at the end of that night. I mean, everyone there thought she was like the best fighter they have ever seen in their entire life after she knocked her out. And the slam before at the end of round 2, when she just like sat on her flexing. Patty Pimblett, had the crowd going nuts, submits Kazula Vargas. Arnold Allen, makes his name for himself, defeats Dan Hooker. He just got Calvin Kattar out of there. Little injury thing happened there, but he made a name for himself there. And then perfect end of the night, Tom Aspinall, hometown guy, gets the win, round 1 over Alexander Volkov. I mean, the UFC went to London with high expectations, but I don't think anyone there expected it to go as well as it did, because that was one of the most exciting fight cards I've ever seen.
Yeah, and to finish it off, honestly, this was probably the hardest one to pick for me, because when a card is good, it's just so hard to, differentiate, because these are all 10 out of 10 cards. And when you get multiple 10 out of 10 cards, it really just is up to whatever you're just feeling right at that moment when you're picking. So I have UFC 275, and it's just mainly because I don't think we've ever really seen 2 back-to-back title fights go so long and just continuously deliver, and just the shock factor overall of this card, like Jiri finally making it, and that Samurai winning in the last 20 seconds of the fight. You gotta love that. I know we talked about that earlier. It's just still crazy to think about. Valentina Shevchenko, invincible until Tyler Santos, someone that I was not very high on. I did not think she's very good. Comes out of nowhere, gives Valentina arguably her toughest fight since Amanda did. So it's really awesome to see that. And then, just Zhang and Joanna running it back. The first fight was one of the best ever, regardless of women's MMA, men's MMA was just in general one of the best MMA fights you can watch. One of the best striking kickboxing fights you can ever watch. And the knockout, one of our knockout of the year contenders, and it was on the an already fantastic card. So that just does nothing but bolster up. And then Jake Matthews knocking out Andre Fialho. That was probably, to be honest, call me crazy, that was the fight I was looking forward to the most out of anyone on this card. And it delivered. I did not expect Andre Fialho to just go out like that. Jake Matthews, I know he just lost to Matthew Semmelsberger the other day, but he's dangerous. And you just put 2 dangerous young guys against one another, or at least young in terms of their UFC career. So it was really nice. And then when you just look at the prelims too, there was really, really fun fights on the prelims. Sungwoo Choi and Josh Kulabau. Kulabau looked fantastic in that fight. Although it went to a decision, it was just a striking clinic, and it was fun to watch. And then Silvana Gomez Juarez knocking out Liang Na. Nasty knockout. Nasty knock. So it was just in general the shock factor of this card. It was in Singapore, so it had a different feel to it. And overall, it was just an amazing pay-per-view. It was the start of the summer, and I think that summer is arguably, besides, I feel like the last 3 months of the year, summer, the June, July, at least, those are some of the 2 most important months of the year for the UFC. And those are when fans are expecting these pay-per-views and these high-level cards to deliver. And this did nothing but set an awesome precedent for the second half of the year. So it has to be my card of the year.
Absolutely. And like I said, on the